Thank you, Yogita. So now I would like to invite Dr. Debulina Kundu. Of course, before that, I would just like to talk about her. Dr. Debulina Kundu is director at NIUA, has over 25 years of professional experience in the field of development studies. She has worked as consultant with the ADB, LSE, HDS, UNDP, UNFPA, etc., urban institutes, Washington and East-West centers, Honolulu, on issues of urbanization, migration, urban development policies, municipal finance, social protection, governance, and exclusions. At NIUA, she has spearheaded as the country's investigator India for the GCRF Center for Sustainable, Healthy and Learning Cities and Neighborhoods, supported by UK Research, and innovative and leading several projects supported by World Bank and KfW. She is a member of various committees formed by central and state governments, including the 5th Delhi Finance Commission. She has several articles published in books and journals. She recently edited a book on national urban policies, Springer, and is currently working on a handbook on urbanization in the global south, and books on urban policies and inequality. She is the chief editor of journals Environment and Urbanization Asia, SAGF, and Urban India, NIUA. She was a co-chair of the task force on LIFE, resilience and values for well-being under G20 think tank initiative. She was a doctorate fellow with the ICSSR and has a PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University on urban governance. So I would request and welcome Dr. Kundu to come and address the gathering.
A very good morning to all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank ADGIO for inviting me to this important discussion. I'm sorry I won't be able to be with you for the entire day. I have several other commitments during the day. At the outset, I would like to make a very fundamental point that urbanization, the process of urbanization, is inevitable. Cities are growing, number one, and rural areas are transforming from rural to peri-urban to urban. And there is no process of reverting back to rural. And this is a global process, and India is no exception. Also, in the absence of 2021 census, we have data from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. There are about 4,900 urban local bodies, 62 cantonment boards, and even by conservative estimates, we have around 5,000 census towns. For the knowledge of the gathering, I would like to mention that urban development is a state subject, number one, and urban local bodies are of two types: statutory towns, which are recognized because urban development is a state subject. Statutory bodies, local bodies are notified as urban by the state governments. That forms the statutory towns. And we also have the census towns, which are urban areas recognized by the census in every census year, decennial period. So these are basically outgrown rural areas which have a population of at least 5,000, density of 400 persons per square kilometer, and at least 75% of the workforce, male main workforce, are in non-agriculture. So the last census which we had, 2011, that threw up an important data, which is 2,530 new census towns came into being. And the urbanization, what we had since the 80s, there was a decline in the urban growth rate. And it was for the first time that the annual exponential growth rate registered an increase of 0.03% from 2.73, it increased to 2.76, and that is basically because of the emergence of census towns. Another important point which I would like to place here is that urban sprawls and census town growth continue to remain the most important characteristic of urban growth. While some cities are shrinking or experiencing negative or low growth rate within the municipal boundaries, what we find is that the peripheries are growing, and for many of the urban centers, the growth is at a very fast pace. Large-scale rural to urban migration is happening at a very moderate rate, and the rate has remained constant over the last 3 to 4 decades. And this growth is again limited to a very few growth clusters. The formation of urban agglomerations is again a factor of the growth of census towns, and it's a combination of the existence of statutory towns at the core and inclusion of census towns at the periphery. And these areas in the periphery of census towns, which are transitional in nature, are experiencing high growth rate both in terms of built-up area and population. There was a report brought out by the United Nations in 2020, which again brought out that countries across the globe, both developed nations and developing nations, are experiencing a growth of built-up areas at a higher pace than population. And this is particularly so in the cities of the global south, and India is no exception. We at NIUA, we did a study with BBSR, an institute akin to NIUA in Germany, where we found that at least in 80% of our districts, the growth of built-up area is, the growth rate of built-up area is higher than that of population. There are governance issues in cities, and more so in the peripheral areas, due to inadequacy of governance structures and the existence of multiple agencies, including parastatals. The 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992 did try to empower urban local bodies. However, the devolution of funds, functions, and functionaries did not happen adequately across all tiers of different size classes of urban centers in different states. Another important factor which we need to keep in mind is the HR, the human resources in cities. And what we find is that the HR structure is still not responsive to the demands thrown up by cities at large, and with climate change in particular. Urban flooding, heat island formation, I think these are the two major parallel manifestations of climate change in most of our cities. We must also be cognizant of the fact that various Government of India missions like the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the Amrut, Swachh Bharat Mission, Smart Cities Mission, National Urban Livelihood Mission, these are all working towards making cities more habitable, citizen-friendly, and agile. However, what we find is that there needs to be more synergy among the various missions, and there needs to be horizontal and vertical connection. And GIS-based master planning, which has been taken up in a major way through Amrut, I think that in addition to the planning demands, that also need to integrate it needs to look at planning through the lens of climate and the concerns with regard to the existing water bodies, green cover, building material of the buildings which are going to come up. I think these all needs to really play a very important role. Immediate attention, I think, needs to be dedicated to the peri-urban areas, which are increasing in an unplanned and uncontrolled manner. The census towns, which constitute the transitional areas or the peri-urban areas or the pre-urban areas. This is how our Honorable Prime Minister defines. I think these areas, they need the utmost attention of policymakers and people like you and me who are interested in really helping cities grow in a sustainable manner. I think this is the most important physical area of intervention. And we had the Chintan Shivir in May this year, where this transitional area was one of the major focus areas of deliberation. And just to bring to your knowledge, the state of Odisha has come up with a rural-urban transition policy, where census towns are not just like that converted into statutory towns. I think there is a concerted efforts are being taken by the Odisha state government in helping the census towns achieve certain benchmarks of urban services before they are notified as statutory towns. And several years back, after the 2011 census results came, I reviewed an article for MOSPI, where a very interesting point was trying to be established. It was that when you look at the NSSO urban frame, that includes both census towns and statutory towns. And the MPC, the monthly per capita consumption expenditure, that has come down in urban areas because of the pulling down effect of the census towns. Because the census towns are basically rural settlements, urban by definition, but rural still by under governance. So the coverage of basic services is still at par with the rural areas. So the point which I would like to make here is that I think we need to devote more attention to the census towns, and the large cities need to bring in, when you look at the HR structure, I think at least one climate officer or climate resilience officer, and also data experts. Now that we are harnessing technology in promoting urban development, so unless and until we integrate the ICCCs in the existing smart cities with the various thematic areas, I think we won't be able to go further. I think that is very, very important to have data experts in our cities. And the concept of shared resources, this also came up in the Chintan Shivir. I think this is very important for the small towns. And that could be promoted for the small towns and the peri-urban areas. And again, finance is one of the most important pillars. I think if you look at the entire hierarchy of towns, what we find is that the big cities do have the wherewithal to generate own resources through property tax or user charges, but the small towns do not. Not only that, even just now for the 16th Finance Commission, we are reaching out to the states for data. Even data for the small towns is not there. So the cities are unable to share the data with us, because they are saying that for the small towns, what do we share with you? The small towns do not even have an accounts officer to put their budgets in place. So I think that the finance and planning, in addition to governance, I think these are the three major buckets where we need to really work. And again, the last point which I would like to stress is that when we are looking at GIS-based master planning, we need to look at through the eyes of climate, and there needs to be very strong interconnection between governance, planning, and financial capacities of our urban local bodies. I end here, and I wish you a very successful event, and I was there with you for the future course of action. Thank you so much. And if you do not mind, I need to take leave.